unsafe society. Places like Brooklyn, New York, have extremely high crime rates, especially youth offenders. Because we want to protect the citizens in society, because we want to fulfill the social contract, we're so proud to propose. Today, we outside proposition have three main contentions to bring to you. I will be doing the first two contentions of government responsibility and the societal contract. And then my partner Jamin is going to talk about deterrence. So before I get into my constructive speech, I would like to first model this debate. So we would define this house as Western liberal democracies. We would define dangerous as any youth offenders that create a physical and tangible harm to society, such as assault, rape, murder, etc. We would define youth offenders as offenders aged from 12 to 18. So we see that they are going to receive the same punishments as adults would receive if they committed the same crime, such as the same time in jail. However, they will still be receiving this punishment in juvenile prisons, with the punishment of the adults, so the same time in jail. So in order to win today's debate, we have to prove two things to you. We first have to prove to you that we have an obligation and duty to try youth offenders as adults. And we would also have to prove to you that trying youth offenders as adults will create more safety, not only for society, but also for these youth, such as decreasing crime rates. Okay. So now I'm going to get on to my first point of government responsibility. So what is the government responsibility? We outside proposition say that it is to ensure the safety of every single citizen. However, crime rates are actually quite high, as we mentioned in Brooklyn, New York. So currently in the status quo, children are clearly committing crimes because the justice system is not serving its role. The government needs to fulfill its role and also fulfill the purpose of the justice system itself. But what is the purpose of the justice system? We say it is to punish and rehabilitate criminals. By trying youth offenders like adults, we increase safety because youth offenders would spend more time in jail in society and themselves, no thank you, and therefore the government will fulfill its role. So, under our model, when children stay in jail for longer, the rehabilitation programs in juvenile prisons will have a longer effect for them. So if you stay in jail longer, you will attend the rehabilitation program longer. If they attend these rehabilitation programs longer, they will get rehabilitated better and longer, which we say outside proposition that this is very effective. Okay, so at the end of the day, when youth offenders spend longer time in jail, the purpose of the justice system is fulfilled, and the government fulfills its role, which results in an increased safety in society. So now I'm going to be moving on to my second point about societal contract. So what is the societal contract? We say that it is a contract that every citizen feels and should respect. What exactly does it do? Well, an example of this would be if you take something away from society, something will be taken away from you. So, for example, if I do not pay my rent, I will firstly be violating a contract that I signed. Secondly, I'll be evicted out of my apartment, no thank you, because I failed to pay my rent, which I own to the owner, of course. So the societal contract does not always apply for these children. We see that children in the status quo receive a lesser punishment than adults, even if they committed the exact same crime. So we see that this is very unjust because they committed the exact same crime, no thank you. So we see that they have the mindsets of creating detriments to society, right? They have the same mindsets as these adults by committing these same crimes to create these harms in our society. I'll take you in a second. Okay, so we see that if they both kill a person, the victim is dead no matter who the criminal is and what age he is, but you will see history.
Okay, but children don't get the same amount of civil liberties, such as voting, or they don't pay taxes. They don't have the same kind of rights as adults.
Okay, yes. So we see that these stuff are supposed to prevent children from harming our society, right? We see that in this resolution, they're directly harming our society by committing these crimes. We see that it is a necessity to give them the right amount of punishment, and we see that they deserve the exact same amount of punishment as adults do if they commit the exact same crime. Okay. So now continuing on with my constructive speech. Okay, so ultimately, because they committed the same crime with the same detriments as an adult, they had the same mindset of an adult to create these detriments, to create these harms to our society. They are going to be an adult in the future. Therefore, they should receive the same punishment as adults do, right? Okay. So what have I talked to you today? So first I've given you the model for this debate, Then I've given you our two burdens. Then I've brought you this idea of government responsibility. How right now we're not enforcing everyone's safety in our country, and how right now the purpose of the justice system is being violated, and how this is very unfair to everyone in our society. Then I have brought you this point, no thank you, about societal contract, and about how if you take something away from society, society would take something away from you, and how that is being violated in the status quo as well. And I also talked about how children have the same mindsets as adults, and how they are going to be adults when they grow up in the future. Okay, because they're going to be adults in the future, because they have the same mindsets of creating detriment to our society, and because we need to respect the justice system and the societal contract in our society in order for our society to function as a whole. We're so proud to propose.
Thank you, Michael.
722.
Okay. So now I call upon the first speaker from the Petra, are you okay? Ready?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, okay. First speaker from the opposition team, Alexander, to deliver the case for the opposition side in this debate. Hey, hey.
Mr. Speaker, we think that side proposition doesn't fundamentally understand what it means to try someone as an adult. Because we think that the minute you say that you're going to try someone as an adult, they're going to have the same consequences, and there simply is no distinction between what is a youth and what is an adult. And we think that in that instance, you send them to prison because that's the same treatment that adults would get in those scenarios. We think that side proposition was trying to squirrel this debate. It's something we won't stand for on our side of the house. What I'm going to do for you today as the first speaker is two things. First off, I'm going to refute everything we heard on their side of the house. Second, I'm going to get into our constructive case with our 3 points about, first off, we're going to talk about principled or justification or unjustification. Second, we're going to talk harms to youth. And then last, my partner, Frederick, he's going to talk about more of these harms, short-term, long-term, to youth as well. Alright, now let's get into some refutation of the points they brought to you today. Then the first main concern we had was their model, right? We think that, first off, they said, well dangerous is going to be like physical harms, murder, etc., right? We think they were very vague on exactly what that's going to be, right? Is that going to be first-degree murder? Is that going to be second-degree murder, manslaughter? We think that we'd like a little more specification on exactly what you're going to be charging as a crime. But second off, they bring you this 12 to 18 is going to be youth, right? Well, we wonder exactly why that's the age group you want to target. Because theoretically, if a 5-year-old murders someone, they have the same mindset as a 12-year-old does, right? Why are we not also going to have them as well charged as an adult? But then last year, they bring you this idea, but well, we're going to send them to juvie prison instead. But as I said in my intro, that doesn't actually give the distinction of charging them as an adult. Because you charge them as an adult, you treat them the same as an adult. If you treat them the same as an adult, that means you send them to prison, not to juvie. But then, okay, so now let's get into the first point that they brought to you was government responsibility. And essentially they said, well, that these kids are committing crimes, the governments aren't necessarily doing anything about it, therefore we should tackle it, right? Well, we'd say that first off, their characterization of crime is a little bit off. We'd say that the majority of situations in cases like Brooklyn, it's not kids committing crime, it's adults committing crime, right? But even if these kids are committing crimes, we think there's a fundamental difference between children and between adults. Right? We think that children have circumstances they can't necessarily deal with, right? If you're born into a low socioeconomic class, we think that you're under the circumstances of that class. We think a lot of those crimes committed are like petty crimes, for example, because they simply need cash. We think that even in these more serious crimes, they're generally caused by things like being in a drug ring or trying to make money off of that, right? We think that the reason that they do that is because simply that they need that cash. So under that, we think that the fundamental difference is these children can't necessarily make a livelihood for themselves. It's the adults that need to make the livelihoods for themselves. In the cases where adults commit serious crimes, they have chosen to do so despite the fact that they actually do have the choice to create a livelihood for themselves. But then second, they bring me this idea about the social contract and that youth commits crimes, therefore we should punish them equally, right? We think that first off, youth don't necessarily understand exactly the situations. Their brains are still developing, as I'm going to get into my point. We think that second off, even if they do, we think that ultimately that they don't have necessarily control over what essentially is going on because they don't necessarily understand the situations, they can't control the circumstances, as well as the fact of these classes that I already mentioned. But then last, they bring me this idea about how spending time in jail is going to lead to better rehabilitation. And we just don't think that that makes sense at all, because we think that the minute you spend more time in jail, you just build up more resentment, more hate toward that society. How would you disagree?
If a youth sees somebody hates and he kills him, how does he not understand the situation?
Okay, because we think that a lot of the time the youth's brain are developing, they're growing, right? So we think that necessarily they don't understand exactly the context of what's going on. But we think that even if they do in a lot of these scenarios, we think there's a reason that they're doing it, right? Like I brought up for the example, maybe you're in the drug trade because you need money because you're in a low socioeconomic class. Your parents don't necessarily have to provide the best lifestyle for you. So we think that even in those cases, they do have some fundamental difference between adults, and we think that that distinction is the reason that we're charging them differently. On a reconstructive case, the first point that we're going to bring to you is this principle on justification, and we're going to prove essentially that there is a difference between youth and adults, right? We're going to break this down to two subpoints. First, we're going to talk biological. Second, we're going to talk social. So let's take a look at this biological aspect, right? So what's the fundamental difference between adults and youth? Well, we think that their brain, right? In the sense that your brain isn't fully developed until the age of about 23 to 26 years old. So how does this affect you? We think when your brain isn't fully developed, the decisions youth make aren't necessarily taking into account everything. They're not rational decisions all the time because your brain is not developed, right? We think that adults understand their brain better, right? We think that adults' brains are fully developed. They can take in everything. They understand exactly what's going on. They have this ability to make more rational decisions than youth do in that sense, right? So we think that when an adult commits a crime, they're fully aware of what's going on. They have the ability to make the rational decisions, something we don't necessarily think youth do. But on top of that, we say that the youth brain is very, very impressionable, right? So that the minute you throw them in jail, you show them that society doesn't care, and that leaves a distinct impression on those children that the fact that they're going to resent society more, as I'm going to talk about in my second constructive point. But now let's look at this idea about social aspect, right? So where are many of these youth criminals from? Well, as I've already said, they're generally from these low socioeconomic areas, right? They aren't necessarily living the best lifestyle. But because their brains are fully developing and they're very, very impressionable, they're likely to take on a lot of what that lifestyle is, right? So what's the difference between youth and adults in these lifestyles, right? Well, we think that first of all, we like to look at the social contract, which they're actually pointing out, which we think that under the social contract, we give up some of our rights to get things from the government, right? Like healthcare. But we think that the difference is, for youth, you give up a lot of the same amount of rights as adults. You don't actually receive the same benefits as adults are necessary, or you don't receive all the benefits that adults do, such as voting, for example, because you aren't the legal age of consent. So we think now essentially what you're saying is, despite the fact that you don't get all those benefits of the social contract because we deem that you're not ready for them yet, we still want you to take the same responsibility as an adult who receives the full amount of the social contract gets, right? Don't think that's necessarily justified under that sense. We think that just simply doesn't make sense under those circumstances. But second off, we say that these crimes can be from outside circumstances in the fact that they either need cash or the fact that it's just simply their family culture in a lot of aspects because they're so impressionable when they're young. We think that makes them more likely to go in these areas, but I don't think that's necessarily right to charge them for that. Second, the idea is we're going to talk about harms to youth. We're going to break this down short-term, long-term. First off, let's look at short-term. So we think that both prisons are very tough, right? We think that's ultimately where you are going to go when you're charged as an adult. So conditions are poor, meals aren't good. We think just in general these prisons aren't doing a very good job, right? But at the same time, what we see is that a lot of abuse happens in these prisons, right? We hear of inmates being beat up all the time. But why are youth specifically at risk? But we think that youth aren't necessarily as strong as these prisoners. They don't necessarily have the mindset or the capability as these prisoners, right? We think the general demographic of people in prison are males who are, between the ages of like 30 and 60 years old. That's the major demographic, right? But we think that we've seen actually instances where some inmates find pleasure in simply just beating other inmates because they think it's a good idea, right? We think that youth, though, are especially susceptible to this because they're weaker. They can't defend themselves. They can't do anything, right? They're going to be viewed as this less idea, this less class in these prisons because they're younger. I think that makes them more likely to be abused in these prisons. I think that's not something that's actually going to help these youth to rehabilitate or go back into society without being largely affected from the prison system. But second, let's look at long term. So what happens when we throw these youth in full prison is essentially you show them that society doesn't care. We don't want to even try to rehabilitate you, right? Because we think the mindset of youth get when they're thrown in prison is the fact that simply society doesn't care. They don't want to have this idea to even try to rehabilitate them. Because essentially when you throw them in prison, you're showing them this is a long-term thing. You're going to be there for a very, very long time. On top of that, we think youth prisons specialize more in trying to rehabilitate, where long-term prisons don't really focus on that. They just keep you on being locked up, right? What's the problem that this is going to cause? We think that it's just going to cause more resentment, more hatred to that same society. So we think that they're more likely to commit crimes when they come out of prison. Because now they're going to say, this society does not care about me. They don't want to do anything to benefit me. They simply want to lock me up and try never to deal with me ever again. We think that's going to cause more resentment, and when they actually do get back in the real world, they won't feel bad when they commit crimes, because they'll say, this society doesn't like me anyways. What matter does it make if I go out and kill a few people anyways, because they don't like me? We think because of that resentment, because it's going to cause more harm, and ultimately, it's because youth aren't as developed and aren't as aware as adults. We're so proud of stand.
8:20.
Thank you. So now I would like to call upon the second speaker from the proposition side, Jamin, right? Jamin.
Yeah, quick question. So is the continuous tap after 30 seconds or 15?
It's after 30 seconds. You like 8:15 you tap 3 times, and at 8:30 you tap non-stop. Okay? Don't do it at 8:15.
Oh, I do as same as I do it now yesterday and.
Okay, just do it. 8:30. At 8:30 you start like.
At
30.
At 8:15 I only run.
Three times 8:15. 8:30 you clap until they stop. Okay? Thank you. So yeah.
Mr. and Madam Speaker, I'd like you to ask yourself a question. When an adult man rapes and murders a woman, is there a different outcome than when a teenager does it and the same extent? Because the answer is no, the outcome is a dead victim, we're extremely proud to be proposing the resolution this House would trial dangerous youth offenders as adults. Okay, what am I going to be doing for you as the second topic speaker is 3 things. Number 1, refutation of their whole case. Number 2, reconstruction of my partner's points. And number 3, I'm going to be bringing to you our third and final contention on our side of the house about this idea of deterrence. So now without further ado, let's get some refutation of Alex's first speech. Okay, what do we hear come out of Alex, like, number 1, right? So they have this problem with our model. Basically, they think that we should send them to adult prison, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we think that number 1, we want what's best for the child. We want, like, a safer place for the child, a safer environment for the child to be rehabilitated. And we think that a juvenile prison is, like, the best way to do that. So thank you. Okay, so the second problem they have with our model is that we didn't really define what dangerous is, right? What is murder? We think that murder, manslaughter, second degree, first degree, they're all dangerous. We think that's pretty clear. Okay, and then their third problem that they had was this idea of the age of like 12 to 18, right? Why only 12 to 18? When a 5-year-old does it, they should have the same punishment. Okay, so what we respond to this by saying that when you're 12 to 18, your brains are actually more developed than like a 5-year-old, right? You know what's right to wrong, you know what to do, you know what not to do. We think that's pretty clear. Okay, now the rebuttal of their first point, no thank you. Their first point is this idea of like differences between adults and a child. And we heard like this idea of like biological differences and how children are impressionable when they're in jail, no thank you. Okay, So ladies and gentlemen, we think that the idea of the jail is to rehabilitate. It's not actually to say to the child, oh, we don't care about you at all, right? The purpose of the jail is to like make the child better, to make them not commit any more crimes. We don't think that that point actually stands. Furthermore, we tell you that because of the fact that they are in like the juvenile system, they're not going to be around adults like who will beat them up or something like that. Furthermore, under that point, he talks about how right now kids aren't getting the same benefits. Kids are getting restrictions because of their age, and basically how that's bad. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that these kids have restrictions because for their own sake, right? We have restrictions such as like you can't drink if you're like 18 or something like that, but you can't drive until you're 16 because of the fact that like these restrictions are for their own benefit, right? We think that if we trial them as adults, it will ultimately be for their own benefits. We'll explain that in our first speech. No, thank you. Okay, so the second point is about this idea of harms, and then how about how like a youth, they're physically weak, and then they're going to get abused in prison. Number one, we tell you that prisons are regulated, there are guards. We think that these guards can actually like help make sure that these like children don't get abused. So thank you. And we realize, and because second response, we tell you we realize this, like we realize there is abuse, but like that's why we're putting it in the juvenile system so that they won't get abused by the adults. Furthermore, if we look at their point, they talk about this idea of like long-term harms to the child, because basically they're going to say that because if we send them to jail, we say that they're bad and we don't care about them. Okay, again, the person to jail is to rehabilitate. We actually send them to jail by saying we think that you deserve a second chance. We think that you actually can like be rehabilitated and you can go back to society and becoming a better person. We don't think that we're saying that we don't care about you. Okay, now that we dealt with some refutation, let's get some reconstruction on my partner's points. For that, sure.
Okay, but first off, we say that if you try someone as an adult, you're going to have to send them to prison. That's the definition of trying them as an adult. We say that even if you do, we say that a lot of prisons don't focus on rehabilitation. They only focus on locking them up and making sure they never see the light of day again.
Okay, but we think that even if like they lock them up and never see the light of day, there are still going to be rehabilitation programs inside these prisons, right? There are still going to be programs that help them rehabilitate, and we think that if these children are getting like locked up for a longer period of time, they're going to be exposed to these rehabilitation programs for a longer period of time, and that's ultimately more beneficial than your side of the house. Okay, reconstruction. My partner's first point was about this idea of government's responsibility, and at that point, he had two major subpoints, right? Number one, the safety of the children, safety of the children, about how basically when you're committing these crimes, where they're like violating their own safety, violating safety of others, and that's ultimately harmful. And second subpoint was this idea of the purpose of the judicial system. How do they respond to these two ideas, right? We don't think that they respond to them individually. We just heard this idea that these children don't choose to do it; they do it because they're in like they do like petty crimes, and then they're in a drug ring or something like that. Okay, what's our response, right? Basically, we think that under our model, we told you that they're going to be dangerous crimes, right? Even if they're only doing petty, we think that because of the fact that they're in like that economic low status, they're not going to kill someone for that, right? If they do petty theft, they're going to like get punished as a child, but if they do murder, they're going to get punished as an adult. We think that was pretty clear. But no, thank you. Okay, so my partner's second one is about the idea of social contract. What do you talk about? Number one, equality between doesn't matter your age, because of the fact that you killed someone, we think that you should get punished for like killing someone, right? And furthermore, he said that if you take something away from society, you pay back for it to the full extent. There shouldn't be a restriction because of your age. So they basically responded to this by saying that a child doesn't understand what he or she is doing. A child doesn't understand. Basically, we think that they do, right? They know if you kill someone, they know how to kill someone, and they know if you're faced with the option, like do this, do something right or do something wrong, they know that option, right? That's why we modeled it 12 to 18, because of the fact that they know what's right to wrong, they know the differences. Okay, now that we dealt with reconstruction and some rebuttal, let's move on. My third point about the idea of deterrence. We think in the status quo, it's undeniable that like youth offenders commit crimes. They commit like heinous crimes, right? Because there is assault in the status quo, because there's murder, there's rape, etc. We think that we need to stop this. It's the 21st century. The percentage of the youth offenders have increased drastically over the past 2 decades. Why is this bad? We think it's fairly obvious. In a society where crime is more prominent, even in children, we think that that's even like just a bad society. And because we have a chance to stop it, we think that we should actually take it, right? Ladies and gentlemen, when the youth and kid offenders, they don't get the same punishment as adults, we think that they don't have a big enough incentive to not commit these crimes, right? Because they know that I'm going to be laid off, because I know that I'm going to get an apprehension for my age, I'm going to commit more crimes because of the fact that I don't get punished as harsh, right? So what's the difference between a teenager murdering a person and an adult murdering a person, right? We think that there isn't a difference, it's the same outcome, so they should get the same punishment. Okay. Because the fact that in the stat quo, number one, the punishments aren't as harsh for the youth, and number two, there's an apprehension when they commit a crime, it's like not as big incentive, and they're going to basically commit more crimes. But at the end of the day, under our resolution, we think that now the child realizes the punishment, right, of committing the crime. They realize how harsh it is, and in the end, it creates a more incentive to not commit the crime. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that there's two scenarios under our resolution. Number one, the child commits a violent crime, right? He realizes that the crime punishment isn't as harsh, and he or she does it again. That's side opposition's work. So what's our work, right? Our side, we think that the child now knows that they're going to get punished to the full extent, and he chooses not to do it. Why is that good? Number one, there's less crime. Number two, it's also more safer for the child. Because we create a bigger incentive to not commit crime, because we create a safer society for the public and for the child, we're extremely proud to be closing. What have I done for you as a second part speaker is number one, rebuttal, number two, reconstruction, number three, our third and final contention. It's because of these reasons more that we're extremely proud to be proposing this resolution. Thank you.
Thanks. I call upon the second speaker from the opposition team, Lieutenant Frederick, to speak. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, it's because there's so many contradictions in the side government's case that we're so proud to stand on side opposition still. And it's because we are so proud to actually be standing for the child's rights and for the child's benefit that we're standing on side opposition. So let's first start off with their contradictions, right? Firstly, they tell you this idea that, well, if this crime has the same outcome, then we should hand them the same punishment. We say, okay, there's a couple of contradictions in their later case. Firstly, we ask, okay, well, if manslaughter kills a person versus murder kills a person, does that mean they should have the same outcome? We see empirically in any law legal system, that's not true. So we think that's a contradiction. But secondly, they say, okay, well, petty crimes are okay, right? As long as they don't really hurt anyone. They still break the laws, though, right? They still have the same outcome if an adult does it or a child does it, but we're not going to give them the same punishment because, reasons. Right? We never really heard that. And then secondly, they talk about this idea, well, if a 5-year-old kills someone, it's okay to, say it's okay, because when it's okay for a certain age to do that because they don't understand, but they never make the distinction why 12 and 8 to 18-year-olds are so much more different, why they're actually fully developed as the adults. We've never heard that analysis either. So we think that's the contradiction they made in their case. We think that makes their entire case fall already. Next, their model talks about this idea that we're going to try them as adults, but we're going to send them to juvenile prison. We think that's not trying them as adults, that's just increasing the punishment. We think that's something that they're trying to squirrel and trying to push on us. We're not going to accept that. We're saying that no, that trying them as adults means there's no distinction between youths and adults, right? So the punishment is exactly the same, where we send them is exactly the same. They can't just simply ignore that fact. We think that's trying to squirrel. So let's take a look at what they really told us today, right? They've told us this idea that, well, actually, basically there's government responsibility, right? Therefore, it's to punish and rehabilitate, right? We say that juvenile prison is able to better do that because they're specifically made for youths, right? All of the prisoners in there are juvenile prisoners, so we think it's better able to handle these juvenile prisoners as opposed to sending them to prison where there's a vast range of people, anywhere from 12-year-olds, as they would tell you, to 60-year-olds. We think there's very different ways and hardened criminals to these juvenile criminals, right? So we think it's very different to rehabilitate these people. So we think that it's going to be hard for prisons to generally accept all of them, right? And then they talk about this idea of social contract. Alex has already told you that children don't get the same amount of benefits from the society. They don't get the same amount of rights. So it's not fair for society to simply impose the same amount of restrictions and the same amount of responsibilities and expect them to be punished in the same way. We tell you that's not fair under the social contract because you're not getting the same amount of things to you. Why is it that you're expected to pay the same amount? We think that that's not true, right? When you buy 2 bread, you pay a certain amount. Now you're saying, well, we're only giving you 1 piece of bread, but you still have to pay an amount. We think that's just empirically unfair, right? And then they talk about this idea of deterrence, right? So because now children know that this is going to be like harmful for them, so therefore they're not going to do it. We say, no, that's not true. As Alex has proven to you, right? The children's minds are not fully developed, so a lot of times there's this, what's called like, you know, they're doing it irrationally, right? They're in the heat of the moment, they can't control themselves, and like because their frontal lobe's not as developed, right? So they're like, okay, and then they do it at that moment, right? So that at that moment, they don't consider, okay, I'm going to go to jail longer for this, therefore I can't do this, or something like that. We think that they're simply doing that. So we don't think that this is going to create a further deterrence because we see so many impulse crimes from these youth because their brains are not fully developed, right? So we don't see this idea of like the deterrence even standing at all. So let's move on to some reconstruction, right? So what did Alex tell you? He told you that, well, they're not fully developed, right? And what did side opposition say? Well, essentially what they told you is that, well, guess what? 12 to 18-year-olds are suddenly more developed, but they conceded to the fact that 5-year-olds are not very developed and therefore they should be tried differently. What we tell you is that scientifically it's proven that your frontal lobe is still developing, the part of rational decisions is still developing. So therefore we think that there is a very, very, very big difference between 12 and 18-year-olds who are in their adolescence to like adults who have fully developed brains. So we think that there's very different, like because of this developmental like difference, we think that side opposition has to concede that there is a difference, right? And therefore the punishment should be different. And then this idea that social contract, right? They tell you that the restrictions are for their own sake. We say why? Because the government does recognize that there still are like developmental like stages of the brain. That's why they put these restrictions there. That's why we're not expected to like be tried the same way, right? As like adults. And then the idea of like no agency, right? They don't have an agency in controlling their own life conditions, and therefore sometimes they have to turn to crime to actually like pay for like their own food and stuff, right? Well, all he said was that petty crimes are okay. And we say, well, under their model, they say anything that's physically dangerous. So if I rob someone, I'm like assaulting them, I'm threatening them in a physical way. That's going to be tried as like a full adult, right? We say that that's still considered as like something under their model. We don't think that real point really has been responded to, right? They say, well, abuse in prison, all they really told us was that it's regulated. We say, yes, it's regulated, but in regular prison, this still happens, right? We don't see it stopping. So we think that, in fact, because these people are weaker, they can't defend themselves in prisons, and guards can't fully defend them either. They're going to be abused. That's a fact. Right? And then they say, okay, well, this idea of like society doesn't care what they do in a moment, that like, you know, prisons keep you locked up. What they told you is that they deserve a second chance. We say, yes, they do deserve a second chance in juvenile prison, which is specifically made to like rehabilitate them, as opposed to like prisons, which are made to rehabilitate like 20-year-olds to like 60-year-olds. Go ahead.
If a child kills a person, the victim is still dead no matter how old the child is.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So why is it that we're not trying 5-year-olds, but only 12-year-olds and up? Because 5-year-olds are killing people, but the person dies anyways. We think that's an inconsistency on their side of the house. We don't see any response. So moving on to my constructive, right? This idea of like why there's increased exposure to criminals, and that's why it makes it so that the youths actually tend to commit crime more. Recognize this. Firstly, when they're tried to, as adults, they enter adult prison, right? Like max security prison, especially for like really, really harsh crimes, right? So we think that now, like in these prisons, they're like hardcore criminals, right? They're like drug lords. They're criminals who are part of like criminal syndicates, right? So this increases their exposure to these kind of hardcore criminals, right? Secondly, we see that prisons are often divided into different gang groups. So they have to join a gang group in order to like actually like look for protection. Because if you're not in a gang group, you're alone, you're isolated, you're going to be abused. So in order to protect themselves, you have to join a group, right? So what that means is that now they're exposed to a lot more criminal activity, right? By virtue of being around them 24/7, right? By being virtue of joining and interacting with them, right? And what we tell you is that like these criminals in these prisons are generally resentful of society, right? Because they blame the situation on their circumstances. So we think that because of the impressionable nature of the teen mind, they're going to think in similar ways. We think that's terrible because now they resent society. They're going to come out and say, okay, well, why do I even care about society's rules? And they're going to commit more crimes. But even if they don't resent society, we say youths when people make the majority of their social connections, right? So they spend the most of their youth inside these prisons. They're going to make like friends with a lot of criminals. When they come out, they're going to be like, okay, well, who do I talk to? Who do I look for help? You look towards these criminal friends. What do they give you? They give you like criminal jobs, illegal jobs. So what does that do? It makes them like commit more crimes because they're more likely to commit crimes because really the only ways they can, you know, actually make any kind of like like any kind of progress in their life is to commit crimes, right? We see criminal records and names being released on papers is going to affect them finding jobs even more, right? So they're going to be able to not find legitimate jobs. They're going to have to turn to illegal methods, and they have the means to do so because now they have like criminal records. So because of the inconsistencies on that side of the house, because we've proven to you that we stand for youth rights and we stand for like less crimes, that's why we're so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's now call upon the third speaker from the proposition side in the debate, Alan.
What side opposition doesn't fundamentally understand is that a child can still be treated like an adult in juvenile prison. We think that they can still receive the same punishment as an adult. But we think that the fundamental difference, the reason why we want to put them in juvenile prison, is that we don't want them to rot into waste. We still want to rehabilitate them and we want them to come out as working and rehabilitated citizens who don't commit crimes again. Because we think that this resolution is justified, because we think that it creates practical benefits and increased safety, not only to society, but also to the individuals, we are so proud to propose today. So ladies and gentlemen, as a third proposition speaker, to clean up this debate, I have two things for you. Firstly, is this resolution principally justified? And secondly, will this motion create any practical benefits? So without further ado, let's move into my first thing about like the principle side of this resolution, which actually perfectly deals with the argument. The first argument about the principle, why this motion is actually principally unjustified. They talk about why the children are young, they're immature, they don't understand, and they don't fully hold grasp of the situation yet. And they told us about like a societal contract. No thank you. But even if a kid can kill someone, we think they're rational enough to understand that we shouldn't just kill a person. We think that if they kill a person, they had an incentive in them to do so. Like they know that they hated someone, so they want to kill them. We think that they're not just like irrational people that no thank you. We don't think that they're just like we don't think that they understand just like killing people for fun. Like, if they want to kill someone, they have an incentive to do so. So we don't think that it's true like when they told us like they don't fully understand the situation yet. They also told us about this idea of the social contract. They told us about like how because children don't receive benefits, just like voting the status quo, like they shouldn't be like treated. They shouldn't have the same restrictions. We tell you that things like voting doesn't matter in this situation. We tell you that like the children and adult are both capable of having an incentive and to kill someone. So we tell you again, like the outcome is the same, like they both kill someone. So ultimately, we tell you they deserve the same punishment, even if like they don't get to vote in the status quo. No thank you. And we think that restriction them is actually for them is actually beneficial. Like even though like John has stated how like we ban them from drinking alcohol, we think that like even though they might drink alcohol, it's actually really extremely harmful for them. We tell you we'll put them in prison longer because they get rehabilitated better. Because when they come out, they'll begin to not commit crimes again. But think on our side of the house, we love them except it's tough love. Okay, so when I appeal at Alex in this speech, I asked him if like children want to kill someone, if children had incentive to kill someone, how does he not like understand the situation? Again, he responded by saying that no, they just don't understand the situation. Again, oh thank you. I already dealt with that. I already told you. But like, if they're rational enough to know I can't be was bad. So if they kill someone, that incentive to do so. No thank you. And when Friday came up, he said we have lots of contradictions in our case. So let's deal with that. What did he tell us? He told you about how there's fundamental difference between like 5-year-olds committing crimes and 12-year-olds committing crimes. We think firstly, in this house school, 5-year-olds don't kill people. We think that like 5-year-olds are usually with their parents like secure. We don't even think they know how to handle a gun, handle a knife yet. So no thank you. We think that they also talk to us about like petty crimes. Again, we tell you that we would punish children with the same punishment as adults if they commit petty crime, but that's not what we're debating about today. We're debating about the dangerous youth criminals. So that looking at there's a fundamental difference there. And again, they bring out this like they told us that like again like we should put them in adult jail if we want to treat them as like adults. Again, we tell you, even if we put them in juvie, again we can still treat them as adults. Like if the adult punishment was 4 years, we tell you that they can still receive the punishment for 4 years in juvenile prison. We don't think that one is actually much more harmful. But what does Michael talk about under this theme of principle side of the resolution? Talking about the government responsibility. What have we heard from side opposition? Again, we heard the same thing about how children in different circumstances. He talked about why children are sometimes in like different like social economic like groups. We tell you that adults can also be in these social economic groups. We tell you that adults can also kill and steal because they're poor. So we tell you that again, there's no difference here. Okay, what else does Michael talk about? He also talked to you about this societal contract. Again, we heard the same thing. He talked to us about how like because children don't receive the same benefits, they shouldn't be restricted more. Again, we tell you that things like voting does not matter in this case. Both children and adults have capacity, incentive, and capabilities to kill someone. Therefore, they deserve the same punishment because the outcome is the same, because they did the same thing. Okay, so that's one thing. Let's move on to the second thing about like, the practical benefits and the side of this resolution. What have they talked about? They talked about like the harms of the resolution. Okay, again, we think that the second and third point is very similar, so let's deal with that. Firstly, they talk about abuse. Talk about why the children will receive abuse in prison. Again, we don't think that their side is different. We think that just because they're in there longer doesn't mean they're going to receive like, any. We think that they're still going to receive the same abuse. It's not on our side of the house. We tell you that they're going to be in a rehabilitation program. We tell you that they're going to be rehabilitated longer. Tell you that ultimately that's actually extremely beneficial. Sure.
Sir, by your logic, if the crime is the same and we must punish them the same, then why are you separating juvie from prison?
Okay, thank you. Okay, we tell you that again, like we think that we should separate children from adults. We tell you that like adults are like adults are much more like intense, and much more bigger, like physically bigger and most like mentally stronger. We tell you that because we want to separate them because we think that children together with children, they get rehabilitated together with them, they can make friends, not necessarily because of crime, but we tell you ultimately that's why we put them like that's why we separate them. Okay, no thanks. That's not okay. What else did they talk? What is John? John also said like because like in this jail, like their guards will tell you ultimately like abuse won't be that much of a problem. What else did they talk about under this point? They also talked about how we're sending them wrong message, about how we're sending a message how the society doesn't care about you. Like we tell you on their side of the house, they still receive the same feeling. So we tell you they still receive the feeling that society doesn't care about you. So we tell you there's no fundamentally any different, except on our side of the house, they get a longer rehabilitation program, they get a longer rehabilitation. Ultimately, that's extremely beneficial. So thank you. What does Frederick talk about under this thing? He talked to you about how this increasing exposure. Again, we tell you on their side of the house, they still get exposure to criminals. And we also we think that we will tell you. Also, we tell you that like juvie is actually better instead of like adult jail. Like in juvie, we always tell you that the rehabilitation program in juvie are catered toward children. That it's actually beneficial, actually better for them. And we tell you that again, they talk to us about how they make criminal friends, and after they get out of jail, they commit the same crimes. Again, we tell you on their side of the house, criminal friends still happen. It's about our side of the house. We think that they get rehabilitation programs that actually benefit them when they attend these programs, and actually will stop them and deter them from committing crime. Which is exactly what John talked about. John talked about this idea of deterrence. Right? We talked about why, like, because they're receiving a bigger punishment, they don't want to commit the crime like before anyone. Because the punishment is bigger, they don't want to receive the punishment. What have they told us? They told us about again, their mindset is immature, they don't understand the situation fully yet, so we tell you, and so it doesn't make any difference. Again, we tell you that adding like a 2-year total punishment actually creates a very significant difference. 2 years down the line will actually make them think, okay, should I commit this crime or not? We think that it will create a fundamental difference before they commit a crime, before they stab someone, before they shoot someone. Ultimately, we think it will create a difference before they commit a crime. Okay, so we think that again, they talk about a lot about like immaturity, yet they never prove why like a lesser crime, because they are less immature, they deserve a lesser crime. So like here as well. Because we think that this motion is principally justified, because we think that it creates lots of practical benefits, not only to society, but also to individuals, we're so proud to propose this.
Thank you, and I call upon.
Can you wait, please? Just a second.
Sorry, doing that. So I call upon Sherwin to deliver the third speech for the opposition side in this debate. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, it's because team proposition has isolated and marginalized the weakest members of our society at the time at which they can most easily be rehabilitated and we can most easily get them back on our side. We're so proud to be opposing the motion before the House today. 2 questions for this third speech today. First, which fulfill the role of the justice system? Second, is it justified then to harm these youth? So first, which fulfill the role of the justice system? 2 points under this, which brought about better safety and which brought about better rehabilitation. I think these are also interlinked. So the argument we hear from them about safety is that when we keep them for longer, we actually get like better safety within the society, right? They tell you that there's a need for this because in certain societies, like Brooklyn, there's a lot of crime. 4 responses to this. First off, in the case of Brooklyn, that's actually not true. And in the case of every crime hub, it's mainly adults between the ages of like 30 and 60 who do end up committing these crimes. Second, even if it is youth, they're committing petty crimes, not dangerous crimes. And third, we tell you that serious crimes are an irregularity. The reason for this, we tell you, is because these crimes are very visceral, very rare, because they're very impulsive. They're not premeditated, right? Youth don't think about these crimes before they happen. And fourth, even if these crimes, we tell you even if these crimes, even if we were keeping them in juvie, as they say in their model, it's a lot easier to get bail when you're in juvie. It's a lot easier to get back into society when you're put in a juvenile prison system. But then their second speaker comes up, and he talks to you about this idea of deterrent. He says it's going to deter youth because they know there's a massive punishment, right? 3 responses. First off, again, we tell you that in the vast majority of cases, the reason these youth commit crimes is not because they think of it months in advance. It's not that they plan it out. They commit crimes because it's impulsive. We think that's not going to deter them because in the spur of the moment, they're still not going to recognize the full consequences of their crimes. But second, no thank you. We tell you that they're not going to understand the difference. Because they're juveniles, they just know that they're going to be tried for murder. But they don't know whether that means a sentence in prison. They don't know what that actually entails in terms of the legalities of it. But they know they're going to be tried for murder. They don't know the difference between our world and their world. Third, we tell you, even if they do know, they have no other choice. And this is what Alex brought to you when he tells you that they have no agency in changing their social circumstances through a legit form, right? We tell you, because of the fact that they can't change their social circumstances like an adult can, because of the fact that they have no other choice to turn to things like drug rings, they're forced into committing these dangerous offenses. We'd like to hear a response from them. What did we tell you to this, right? We established the distinction between juveniles and adults. We established the distinction when we told you that their biology is fundamentally different. Their brains develop, right? This is a physical, biological difference, not anything else. It's the fact that they are younger that there is this difference. We also brought up the fact that by their logic, if there is no distinction, if the crime is the same, then by their logic, 5-year-olds should be tried just like adults, right? We tell you that because there is a difference between a 5-year-old, between a juvenile, and between an adult, we've established that distinction. We'd like to see them break down those borders and tell us that there isn't one. Okay, second question, which better helps rehabilitate these kids, right? They tell you a longer time in juvenile prison is what's actually going to make these people productive members of society, right? 4 responses. First, again, that's based on the assumption that we should put them in juvenile prison. No, ladies and gentlemen, the spirit of this motion is that we shouldn't differentiate between the punishment we give juveniles and the punishment we give adults. That's specifically what it means when you give them the same kinds of sentences, right? You put them in prison. So we think that their fundamental assumption here is that we're putting them in juvie. We don't think that's what they should be arguing for on their side of the house today. But second, we tell them even if you are putting them in juvie, at the point at which you put them in juvenile prison for a really, really, really long time, they're going to think that you don't care about them. They're not going to want to buy into the rehabilitation process because you've isolated them for so long away from society. You've isolated them in that one place, even if it isn't harmful. But third, because we think that this motion should be about prison, and we're going to prove that later, we tell you that they're going to be hurt, beat, and abused. That's the analysis Alex gives you. They just tell you, well, we can fix the prison system. We have measures to sort of counterbalance the fact that there are abuses. No, ladies and gentlemen, we've been trying to do this for years and years, and there are still rampant abuses. There are very visceral crimes committed in these prisons, right? We think it's just not justified to let youth be exposed to these kinds of crimes, right? But then Alex also tells you that, Alex also tells you that there's going to have a long-term harm, right? Because when you try someone as a juvenile, the fact of the matter is their identity isn't released, right? There's not this kind of like propagation in the media, so they can still get a job afterward, right? They can still get legitimate forms of employment afterward, no thank you, right? This means they can start a new livelihood. But when you put them in prisons and you release their name all over the news, the chances of them getting a job is far less likely. The chances of them being productive members of society when they come out isn't likely. We don't hear a response from them on their side of the house. And lastly, Frederick Telt gives you this idea about social networks. He tells you that they're going to have more social networks with criminals. So even if they don't resent society after being beaten, abused, and isolated, I'll take you in a second, they're going to have these kind of networks where that becomes their only legitimate means of actually getting back into society, of actually having an earning potential, and bringing them out of their social circumstances. Why is that a thing?
If your side don't want to expose children to abuse in prison, why don't we just don't punish them at all?
All right, well, we think that children should get some kind of punishment because we've established the fact that the goal of the justice system is to rehabilitate. That's why under our model, we put them under juvenile prisons, which don't abuse them, which have like less cases of abuse, less cases of beatings, and less cases of these visceral crimes committed against the people who stay in these prisons. But at the same time, rehabilitate these people. We think we've made the very clear distinction between what juvies are and what prison systems are. All right, second question is today. Is it harmful? Is it justified to harm these youth? They give you this idea of the social contract, and they tell you, their logic here is, if it's the same crime, if it's the same consequence, then it's the same mindset behind that crime. There are a lot of problems with this point, right? We have three responses. First off, they never tell you why the same crimes lead to the same mindset. They just assert this. We think the outcome of murder is the same. Like, the outcome of a dead person is the same. But whether that was second-degree murder, first-degree murder, or manslaughter, we still differentiate between those things because there's a different mindset in each of those cases, right? But second, we tell you that there are different mindsets, right? We tell you, like Alex says, they have no other choice. That's the reason they do this. That's the distinction we establish when they can bring themselves out of their social circumstances when we talk about adults, but youth can't bring themselves out of their social circumstances through legitimate means. But beyond that, we again tell you that these crimes are usually impulsive, whereas when adults commit crimes, they're usually premeditated, they plan the murder out. We think that's the fundamental distinction in the mindset. And third, we think that because the mindset is different, the sentence is too, right? We give the example of manslaughter. When you don't intend to commit the crime, we give you a different sentence, right? When your biology restricts you from making a rational decision on whether you should commit the crime or not, we think we have the obligation to step in. Again, we tell you they never establish the distinction between why this is any different for 5-year-olds. We ask them in a POI, and they just kind of like shrug it off by saying, well, no, 5-year-olds know what's right and wrong, but we're still not going to punish them because that doesn't make sense, right? We established a clear distinction between these three sorts of age groups. We think they have to address that in their trial. And lastly, we tell you, even if they have the same mindset, even if they have the same consequence, right, then why is their model only putting them in juvie? If the crime is the same, the mindset is the same, according to their logic, we should put them in prisons. We don't understand because that fundamentally contravenes the idea of their model. What we told you is they don't have the same social exposure. We never really heard a response. At the end of the day, it's because we want to facilitate these people back into society. We want to rehabilitate them, and we've proved a fundamental distinction in their very biology, their very physiology. We're so proud to oppose.
Thank you. So now I'd like to call upon the last speaker from the opposition team, Alexander, to close this debate for the stage.
Mr. Speaker, the near side proposition today missed a lot of distinctions in their case. They couldn't tell you what the difference is between a child who's, say, 5 years old and commits murder or a child who's 12 years old. 12 years old and commits murder. They couldn't tell you the difference of trying someone as an adult fully, sending them to prison and giving them the full extent of their crime under their model, or sending them to juvie and trying them more like half and half on adult and youth. It's because we don't think that they can make those distinctions today that we've already won on our side of the house. What I'm going to do for you as a summary speaker is define this, or is summarize this debate in terms of two main questions. First, which world is actually going to be better for these youth? Second, which actually is going to create a safer society? On to this first point about which world is going to be better for the child. So the first point that they get up here today and tell you is that spending more time in these jails is going to lead to better rehabilitation, therefore they're less likely to go back into crime. The first response, though, is that many of these prisons don't actually even bother rehabilitating. We see in the United States, they don't focus on rehabilitating. They think that their job in those prison systems is simply just to lock them up and keep them there as long as possible. They don't care if you rehabilitate them. But second off, the more time someone spends in jail, the less likely they are to rehabilitate, because now they just have more resentment going towards that society. They have more hatred going towards that society. They're not going to want to buy into the rehabilitation that society is offering. Alright, now let's take a look at the next point that they brought to you, which was that, well, youth are now going to have less incentive to actually want to go out and commit the crime, right? Well, we say that first off, a lot of these youth do things in the heat of the moment, like Frederick brought up, right? We don't necessarily think that these are planned out things. But second off, we don't think that a lot of these youth are necessarily going to understand the difference that they're going to be getting in terms of the punishment, right? We think in a lot of these low socioeconomic classes, they don't necessarily even understand essentially how the justice system works. When you don't necessarily understand the punishment you're getting, we don't think that's actually going to act as a deterrent. Next point that they bring to you was that, well, we brought actually to you was that youth have petty crime, but those can also be harmful too, right? Their only response to that was, well, they don't really cause these bodily harms, right? But by their thing, if you go with an armed robbery against someone, that can also cause bodily harm. Why are we also charging them the same way as we're charging murder, right? Under their model, that's something that we should already be doing. But they never actually addressed that point on their side of the house. Next thing that they bring you was essentially that we need to separate adults and